from, oh, there we go.
There we
There
go.
it is.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Walk in 90. This is going to be a very short show just because we are going live tomorrow for the Henny Derby. So today you've got me and Kyle. We're joined here by the VP of DEI and Community Relations. Chris, hello. Please tell the people about yourself and how you got to USL League One in the DEI committee.
Absolutely. Yeah, good evening. As Ebony mentioned, Chris Busey, the newly minted VP of DEI and Community Impact at USL. This is a very new and inaugural role for USL. So I do feel, very privileged to kind of carry that banner for United Soccer League. This is a historic moment for the league. I come from more of a higher ed background. Before joining United Soccer League, I was actually a tenured associate professor at the University of Florida, where I was conducting research, building community liaison programs, as well as curricular avenues for undergraduate students, especially a lot of student athletes, as well as graduate students who were interested in studying issues of culture, intercultural communication, racial inequality, and racial equity. I know that may sound a bit disjointed from soccer, right? So it's like, what does this have to do with USL League One? How did you end up in this job? I've been a soccer coach for over a decade now. I actually coached a former USL League One player who played for both Richmond Kickers and Fort Madison. So just a little known fact there. I don't even think most people in the office know that. So
and now they do.
Now they do. But yeah, I've always had one foot in the soccer industry, either as a coach, as a member of United Soccer Coaches, more recently becoming more and more active with the United Soccer Coaches Black Coaches Advocacy Group. And I also had my own LLC where I was doing research around sports with high barriers of entry, one of them being soccer, right? Looking at the economic and racial and geographic barriers that prevent certain groups from participating in club soccer, as well as other sports. And so that's kind of how I ended up in USL League One in a very roundabout way. I can go deeper into detail if you want, but I think that's a little bit more concise.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, you kind of touched on it. Like, what made this role at USL so appealing to you? What kind of made you kind of take that shift over from higher ed to kind of this, I guess more or less like sports league?
Right. Yeah. So for me, this was about synergy more than anything. I received my PhD at a relatively young age, and being a professor for over a decade, to be honest, it just got a little boring at some point. So I needed a shift. And also I meant just the dynamics of higher education, especially post-COVID-19. It just left me wanting more, right? Wanting to try something new and really kind of jump into my purpose a little bit more and finding more meaning and value and joy in what I do. And at the end of the day, I'm a soccer head. I want to see this sport improve and get better in this country, not just in terms of the product that we put on the field. I think we all want to see us improve in that regard. But I want to see our coaching staffs be more diverse. I want to see our senior executive and our front office staff be more diverse and inclusive and welcoming of all populations in this country. And so I saw this as a real synergistic opportunity to marry my research and, teaching background with soccer. It made sense.
So you said you're very new to the role, 2.5 months. What do you see is the overarching purpose of, I don't want to say what you want to see change, but you have an idea in your mind of how you want this role to grow.
Absolutely.
Within your time period there. So what have you seen from the beginning, and where do you want to see it go?
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I start? Y'all, the issues are tenfold, as you could imagine. And I don't think they're unique to USL. So that's not any sort of indictment on USL as it is, the larger soccer ecosystem in this country. For me, this is legacy work. I would love to leave behind a structure and a system. And I think that's partially what we've kind of lacked when it comes to DEI in soccer, but DEI in sport in general. Thankfully, many people have been very quick to act, but act without really understanding the principles and strategies that they're acting around. And so, what happens when that action loses interest or momentum, and there's no strategy, principles, or core values to tie it back to? Then a lot of those efforts tend to fade away, right? We saw this kind of like post 2020 with George Floyd. Every organization from sport to education, higher ed, you name it, multiple institutions really dove into this work and created DEI positions, even though DEI has been around for a long time. But again, they brought on these DEI roles with very little understanding that we are individuals who are brought into an organization to build structures, systems, processes through strategy. And when we're not allowed to do that work freely, again, this is where a lot of the work loses momentum. So for me, this is about legacy. This is about trying to innovate and do something different but meaningful. Coaching diversity gets a lot of the attention when it comes to these issues. We have the Rooney Rule with NFL, which is proven not to work. So again, this is where we have to be innovative in terms of building a structure that's going to last beyond my tenure at USL and continue to have impact, down the road.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you mentioned, having more diversity, not just in the coaching staff, but also front office. Is it also an aim to have that diversity even in the USL headquarters as well, in terms of just roles scattered throughout USL?
Yep, absolutely, certainly. And quite truthfully, to me, that's where it has to start, right? Like, you have to have your house in order before you go telling other people what to do. That's what my mother and my grandmother always used to tell me growing up. I kind of follow that very same ethos, at USL HQ. Our HR team has done an excellent job in really trying to push these initiatives. With me coming on board, the next steps to figure out how can we work in a more collaborative, effort to bring about the change that we want to see in the headquarters.
You also have the title of like community initiative.
Yeah.
How does DEI fit into that role?
That I would say is not so much a challenge, but this is where we have to be like very creative, right? In terms of thinking about DEI from the corporate standpoint, which is like the headquarters, diversifying our hiring practices. That's a very, I think, general HQ corporate kind of approach to DEI. But then when you look at the community front, when you look at USL in particular and the communities that we're in, we are in markets that serve very diverse populations. And it is incumbent and imperative for our clubs to create an environment that is welcoming and inclusive. Now, what does that mean? That means for anybody who steps foot in that stadium, they should feel psychologically safe to come on that pitch and play, and feel safe to come on that pitch and right, in the most liberated manner possible. And every fan should feel free, regardless of racial, ethnic, gender, um, sexuality, citizenship, language. Every fan and stakeholder who walks foot into that stadium should be able to find a place for themselves in that stadium. As we know, soccer hasn't always done a good job of that. Um, and that's just a harsh truth that we have to face in this country. And if we don't acknowledge that, then we're not going to bring the change that's necessary. So when we start to talk DEI and community impact, is really about helping our clubs understand that we represent and embody a community, right? One, and then two, more often than not, the community has already done the heavy lifting for us, right? Like these aren't newly formed cities that clubs are establishing themselves in. These are cities that have their very unique histories, their narratives of struggle, their narratives of progress, and it's up for the clubs to come in and really try to understand that community history that's been created long before the club was even thought of.
Yeah, and I was gonna say we mentioned like going and having these markets where there is that diverse population, and one of the biggest topics is always going to be expansion, having new clubs in these different markets. Is that going to be something that you're going to be able to provide input, or something that you're going to research as well to kind of evaluate some of the options that would be presented to USL?
Yep, absolutely. So one very unique as well as tiring thing about my role is that my role cuts across every single function of the organization, from expansion to onboarding to sporting operations, like you name it, right? So my days, y'all, are long. Um, long but productive. On the expansion front, where I'm really going to be working closely with the expansion team, is to really help us to think about, and this is where the DEI and community impact part comes in. Who is the fan that we are appealing to? Like when a club decides that we want to establish a footprint in this community, right? We have to be mindful of what that community looks like, right? Um, as well as ensuring that we are being inclusive and kind of charting a path for how we want to build a fan-centric product. Again, not all the time do clubs in the expansion process, and again, I'm not just talking USL, I'm talking across the United States. How often do we think about the fan who comes from a racial or ethnically or linguistically diverse background, right? How often do we think about neurodivergence and physical abilities when we're building and constructing a brand new stadium? I know that there's certain regulations with ADA compliance, but there's still ways that we could be more forward thinking about sustainability, right? As well. So I do have a major role, or will be playing a major role, in terms of reshaping our expansion processes as well.
I want to touch on a very, well, I don't want to say recent, a very special holiday that's coming up, Juneteenth.
Yeah.
As you know, Walking 90 Kickers versus Ford, famous Henny Derby. What does this rivalry and derby mean to you, if you know anything about it?
Yeah. So I have become somewhat familiar with the Derby. We were having a conversation in the office about it about 2 weeks ago. Juneteenth for me, when I think about the Derby in particular, the first thing that comes to my mind is joy, right? And the opportunity for Black soccer fans to just experience joy in the soccer atmosphere, right? And to create that form of communal self-recognition through a derby, experience. To me, that embodies in some ways what Juneteenth represents. We know that Juneteenth also represents a long history of enduring struggle, right? A long quest for liberation, right? Because freedom and liberation are not necessarily the same thing. I used to teach that in one of my classes on racial equity. But, joy, again, is such a major component of Juneteenth as well. The ability to laugh, to have fun, to celebrate, to see one another, and to appreciate the creativity that we bring to a setting like League One and USL. To me, again, that embodies what Juneteenth is about.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, touching on, expanding with Juneteenth, also it being Pride Month. So, you have a lot of these clubs that are trying to have these Pride Month initiatives, and the league's trying to do that. And what would you say is like the best way to go about, supporting, Pride Month and Juneteenth, like making sure, because obviously there's going to be supporters and fans and people that have that both be such a significance to them. So
Yeah.
what do you think is kind of like the importance of trying to make sure that, yes, we still have Juneteenth, we also have Pride, but we can't, like, not having it just be one or the other.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, right? And I don't know if we're fully there yet as a country in terms of truly understanding intersectionality, right? The ways that gender, race, and sexuality meet at a particular intersection, right? And it's not additive. It's not gender plus race plus sexuality. It's a confluence, right, of the three plus other social identities that become layered into that equation. I'm citing Kimberly Crenshaw here, who kind of coined the term back in 1988. Again, as a country, I don't think we're fully there yet in understanding what intersectionality is and how it shapes people's experiences, right? And also understanding how, like, a concept like intersectionality becomes so key to broadening the way we understand celebratory awareness months like Pride Month, right? One conversation I was having with a recent organization, actually in Richmond, Black Pride RVA, I was talking with one of the co-founders about this very thing. When we think pride, there's a typical, white American thrust to the imagery that is associated with Pride Month, and just what LGBTQ issues and advocacy at large, and the issues that Black queer women, Black trans women have to face in this country, and not only in this country, but abroad. You look at Brazil, you look at Colombia, as well as the US, and you just kind of trace statistics, and you'll see that Black trans women are some of the most vulnerable populations in the Americas to homicide and violence. That's actual proven statistic through research. But again, if we're not thinking about these things through an intersectional lens, we miss that point. And, I think Juneteenth and Pride Month do provide us with an opportunity to at least start to engage that conversation and broaden our scope on these issues. Y'all got me teaching tonight a little bit. Kind of going back to like,
well, it'll get a little bit more lighthearted and fun.
Going back to like Kimberly Crenshaw, Audre Lorde.
You spoke about like expansion and being in the community, and you touched on intersectionality. Where do you see not only League One but this sport going in the next few years?
Yeah, well, I think relevant to the concept of intersectionality in the future of the sport, one of the things that we see is we do see the growth of the women's game in this country. USL just recently announced our first 8 markets that will be launching for the Super League next year. And when we start to talk about creating opportunity for more women to play this game at the professional level in this country, what also comes with it are more opportunities to coach this game, right? To serve as analysts, chief medical officers, athletic trainers, presidents, CEOs. I mean, you name it, right? It runs the gamut. So we're also providing a number of opportunities to work and support this game, even from things like a broadcast in front, media coverage, and so on. When I think about intersectionality in the future direction of this game, I will continue to say it loudly. We have to be thinking about amplifying and being intentional in ensuring that more women of color, and especially Black women, are provided an opportunity to both play, work, and support the growth of this game in this country. Black women and women of color at large are out here playing the game. They're thinking about the game. They're creating philosophies around the game. They're creating tactical and technical advancements relative to this game. But oftentimes, those efforts and endeavors don't necessarily surface, at least in public discourses or in media outlets as well. And I think we have to be more intentional about ensuring that these opportunities exist.
Yeah, and I know you were talking about, the amplifying. And one of the things that, could amplify both in a positive or negative way is sponsorships or, partnerships that the league and clubs have with different brands. Is that something that you're trying to, keep I know you said you got to keep things in house, but when you're going to talk with these clubs, being like, hey, you got to be cognizant of, who you're partnering with and what message that could give to supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this comes with, and these are some of the challenges, right? Of I think growing a soccer league and just doing business and sport in general. And we're seeing numerous cases, especially this year, of not only clubs but baseball teams that are kind of having a tough go, right, in this regard. I think for myself, in my role and in assisting clubs in building out, kind of their community identity, I always start with what are your values and what are your principles? And if we can start with your values and your principles, when it comes time to think about sponsorships and partnerships, we lead with our core values, we lead with our principles, and ensuring that we're not doing business with people who might hold certain viewpoints, right, that are in misalignment, right, with our values and our principles. That requires some hard introspective work for a lot of leaders across this country who run sport franchises to not just think bottom line in terms of sacrificing who's in that locker room, right? Or who's walking through that office and who may hold a different identity than us and a different life experience. So these are all things that we have to take into consideration. But again, it starts with understanding that identity, that DNA, those values, those principles. And that, to me, is what leads to more successful sponsorships and partnerships. Man, these are good.
I want to end it on I want to end it on a good note. I mean, not that this hasn't been good, because this has been very informative, and I really appreciate you coming on with us. I want to hear what your biggest soccer accomplishment has been and what you hope the next one could be.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Biggest soccer accomplishment. Jokingly, I did play my first rec game on Tuesday night for the first time in a couple of years. So actually walking off the field on both feet was an accomplishment. Although I still have a heavy.
I was gonna say, how was the next day? That's the important part. How's the next day?
Yeah, that's the thing. Biggest soccer accomplishment. Man, that's such a good question. One thing I will say is I've learned as I, matured and have, obviously gotten older that, I shouldn't take for granted what it has meant for me as a coach, to coach in primarily communities of color. I have coached in the club scene. But this is where I kind of refuse to neglect local schools, which I know is kind of like not popular to coach, high school and middle school anymore because it's all about the club and travel game. But the impact that I have been able to make in the lives of young men and women, now men and women who have graduated college, but still keep in touch. That I'm still able to talk to. And, they talk a lot about the life lessons that they've learned, the experiences that they still take with them today. On those squads that I coached, most which were fortunately successful, I think that's what immediately comes to mind, with that question in terms of some of my biggest successes. At the end of the day, y'all, this work has a real human element to that, to it. And I think I know that y'all know that I'm preaching to the choir here. But it's important not to lose sight of that human element as like we focus on things like expansion and onboarding and sponsorships and partnerships, which are certainly very important business endeavors as we consider growth and scale of the sport in the country. But that human element is just something that I always come back to in thinking about impact. The way that this game really can truly change people's lives when we are being intentional about ensuring that they're seen, that they're valued, and that they're respected both on and off the pitch.
Yeah. And then I have a lighthearted question to end things. What has been your favorite soccer memory? It could be while you're watching, while you're playing, while you're coaching. Just when you think of like a soccer memory, what's one that really stands out to you?
That Barca comeback against PSG.
That was a vibe.
Yeah, that's a moment. That Sergio Roberto goal, like that will forever resonate with me.
Are you a Barca fan?
Oh, heavy.
Oh boy.
Oh man.
Heavy. I'm sorry. Look.
It's all right.
We do not judge that much. There are worse things you could have said.
Yeah.
Look, Barca is, y'all, like, I've cried.
So what you're saying is the 2019 Champions League semifinal second leg was not your favorite moment.
No.
It was mine.
No. He's a oh god.
No.
I was gonna say I had fun with that one.
No, not that, not the 8-2. No, none of it. No. I did go to Iniesta's last match.
Oh.
In Barcelona. I taught in Spain for a little bit as well, and I was a visiting professor at the Autonomous University of Barcelona for a little bit. And so that also gave me an experience, like a real direct kind of hands-on experience with the club. But that, again, that comeback against PSG, I distinctly remember where I was, like in my living room. Yeah. Losing my mind when Sergio Roberto scored that goal. But NES's last match was like emotional, y'all. Like I was in the stadium legit crying. It was like my wife and kids looking at me, like, are you serious? And like, yes, this is a major moment. Like,
Yeah.
Man, there's so many moments, that come to mind. What hooked me on the soccer? This is how I became a Barca fan. I didn't grow up playing the sport. I was always interested in the sport. And fortunately, I've lived in communities that have been diasporic in nature, especially like Black diaspora. And so all my Haitian and Jamaican friends played soccer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I never had access to it. I had childhood leukemia, for 5 years, which kind of prevented me from playing youth sports for a while. But it just wasn't around. So I grew up watching like the Dream Team, NBA, obviously NFL, 94, 98, and especially the 2002 World Cup, those Brazil teams, that's what hooked me. Like when I saw a group of Black dudes playing soccer that resembled the way that I saw the Dream Team play basketball, it was a wrap. It was a done deal. And then from there, I just kind of followed those players as they made their way into the Barcelona legacy. So that's how I ended up becoming a Barca fan. So it was pre-Messi actually. So I'm not like a bandwagon jump on Barca fan. Like I was rocking with Barca when Marquez was their center back. Deco, those
that is a throwback. That's throwback.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I was gonna say, I feel like that 2002 Brazil team really I feel like the 2002 World Cup just left a lasting impression for a lot of people.
Yeah. That World Cup, that was Tokyo?
Yeah, Japan and South Korea.
Yeah. So I remember that was my freshman year of college. And a group of us would just like wake up mad early and go down to the common area where they had the big screen TV, the old school big screen TVs that had the big back on them.
Had one of those in our basement for our family.
Yep. And we would just congregate, in the common area and watch it. So I distinctly remember that World Cup too. Is like a real bonding moment too. And I think that was like, if there's a hook, that's what kind of set the hook for me.
Awesome.
Chris, I appreciate you coming on so much. This was so informative and felt like an old school kickback. Thank you. I'm excited to see the work you do for USL League One and USL in general. Do you have anywhere that you're sorry? Do you have socials that you want to plug here? Here's your chance.
So this is where my viejo self comes out. Like all I have right now is Instagram, which I just started like a month and a half ago. And y'all, it is bad. You should see me trying to like do stuff on Instagram. I've deleted more posts than I've actually posted because like the text is all in front of the picture. But it's at chris.busphd. That's my Instagram. Is that called an Instagram handle? Is handle the right word?
I honestly don't know what the terminology.
I left Twitter a few years ago. It was too toxic.
Good call.
Yeah, I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah, it was too much. But you gotta follow me on Instagram at chris.busphd.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much again, Chris, for coming. And for those of you watching, the audio of this will come out sometime the next week. I'm not making any promises because I will be getting on a flight tomorrow to get to Richmond, and we will have our live show tomorrow at City Stadium. So make sure to check us out. Otherwise, thank you again for listening, and we will catch you all later.
No doubt. Y'all have a good one. I appreciate y'all bringing me on.
Thanks.
Later.
Yep.
Kyle.
It's still
Sorry,
saying
I'm
live.
waiting for this to load because my computer's trash.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, yeah, it's still saying live.
It still says live. You're correct.
Yeah.
You know, StreamYard hates my computer.
The
I'm
behind
excited
the
for tomorrow, though.
scenes. We're getting the behind the scenes look now. Yeah,
I am
gotta
excited
finish
for
packing.
tomorrow. It's gonna be a great time.
Yeah, I am packed, more or less.
I did not. I still have to do that. I'm the worst person when it comes to travel. I pack the night before or the day of.
Well, because the thing is, I have to drop the kids off at daycare, and then I'm going straight down to Midway in Chicago because my flight leaves at like 11:30.